so that we're not here 40 years from now, and that the tribes can continue to have a voice and be heard in this arena. I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. I've been in Congress 32 years, so I'm not sure when those 40 years began or ended, but maybe I'll see the full 40 years, God, and the voters willing, of course, on that. You know, we are dealing here with something that's simple and yet complex. We clearly, and I never leave home without it, I carry the Constitution with me. And this Constitution does not grant sovereignty to the Indian tribes. It recognizes sovereignty. It's a real sovereignty. Indian tribes are not the Knights of Columbus, which I belong to. They are not the VFW, which my son belongs to. They are sovereign nations. And they are not granted that sovereignty. It's a retained sovereignty. And it's recognized in the Constitution in two different places, where it talks about the Constitution and all treaties entered into are the supreme law of the land. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says, the Congress shall have power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. It recognizes all three as sovereigns. Foreign nations, the several states. We have 50 sovereign states making up the United States. It doesn't grant France or Germany or the Russian Federation its sovereignty. It says that we recognize that sovereignty, right? So it's a real sovereignty. And that might create some complications, but it's real. And when we have three sovereignties, we also, most of us up here, looking around up here, have two citizenships. Probably most of you down at the witness table have three real citizenships. I am a citizen of the United States. Very proud of that citizenship. I'm a citizen of Michigan, and I have obligations, responsibilities, and rights that flow from both those citizenships. And that's it. I have two citizenships. My Chippewa and my Potawatomi, my Indian tribes, those members, citizens, have three citizenships. And they have rights and responsibilities that flow from all three of those citizenships. We know, for example, the Indians have proven their U.S. citizenship time and time again because a larger percentage of Native Americans have served in our armed forces than any other group. They're citizens and good citizens of the state of Michigan and contribute a great deal, by the way, to the state treasury. And then they are citizens of their sovereign tribes. So those are the realities that the law has to work around. And whenever we enact a law, we cannot ignore the Constitution. And that's why very often we get into some of these contacts between these three sovereignties. And it might create some difficulties, but they are difficulties that are based upon the Constitution itself. So I appreciate all of you struggling with this, defending your sovereignty, and recognizing the sovereignty when you deal with the Indian tribes. It's extremely important. And that's true on the state level. I think all the schools really pretty well accept the AYP program of the states. But the state, when it has these Indian schools, is required to sit down in good faith and talk to the Indian schools, the Indian leaders, in good faith and try to work out what standards and testing the AYP will be on the state level. That's a requirement. And then when the Secretary of the Interior is looking for alternatives to that, he or she has the obligation to sit down, sovereign to sovereign, one not more equal than the others. You can't be more equal. You're either equal or not equal, right? Sit down and discuss and try to find some common agreement. And that takes patience. When we negotiate with France, that takes patience. When we negotiate with the Russian Federation, it takes patience. But I think we have to recognize that we sit down at that person, the other side of the table, is, oh gosh, we got more work to do. These Indians want something. No, these sovereigns want something. And that sovereignty is guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. And I think that's the attitude that we have to take in. Then perhaps we can make some progress. And it won't always be easy when you have to recognize the other side has an equal voice at that table. And you have to reach agreement, not an imposed agreement. When you get a memorandum of understanding, it can't be something that's handed to say, this is our understanding, right? It's a memorandum of understanding based upon mutual agreement. That's very important. So the Indians have the obligation to protect their sovereignty. Those who are not representing the Indian tribes directly have an obligation to recognize that and address the matter in that fashion. Let me ask this. That's my sermon today, but I spent some time in a seminary, so I do preach a bit at times. But